you, guys. Yeah, when it comes to innovation in the medical sector, and I'm talking about really interesting technology, specifically surrounding AI use of prescription medical monitoring and also COVID-19 testing. Our guests today, Relay Medical, are leading the way in both. Clark Kent is president of Relay Medical and joins us from the lab, it looks like, today. Clark, great to have you on the show. Let's start off with a little bit of history when it comes to Relay Medical. Tell us about the company and its recent shift to focus more on COVID-19.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Very, very plainly, we've been in the medical technology business now for several years, specifically in building solutions, hardware and software solutions for monitoring prescription medication use. Last year, we were kind of in the thick of pre-commercial operations with a plan to go commercial with our pharmaceutical adherence technologies. And of course, COVID came in and upset the apple cart just as it did across industries. And we looked at how we could apply our technology, our resources, human resources, and specializations to what was happening at COVID in those early days. And of course, not knowing if that was something that was going to stick around for 30 days or 3 years, we had to make a decision to see what we could do and how we could apply ourselves. We did that. Our CSO is a former infectious disease expert, working in medical technologies for many years. And basically what we did was we applied our technology background, our assets, our AI software infrastructure to providing a testing solution for what you can call decentralized, high efficiency COVID testing. And so that's kind of in a nutshell how our history led us to here. Not a complete pivot away from our core business, just as a small company as we are, early days, you have to make those decisions to how you keep the wheels on and how you can address as many possible applications or verticals as you can with the assets you've developed. And that's a big part of what we do. And we're now we're showing that we've done that quite successfully, and we're just in the early stages of us, I think, establishing ourselves as a major player in the COVID testing space.
Clark Kent is president of Relay Medical. Clark, let's talk about this technology and specifically the difference between, everyone hears about these PCR tests. If you've traveled in the last couple of months, you've been forced to, undergo these PCR tests. This technology focuses on lateral flow testing. First off, let's talk a little bit about the difference between the two and how we can, maybe hear a little bit more going forward as far as COVID-19 is concerned with lateral flow testing.
Absolutely. So we talk a lot, or you hear a lot in the media, rapid diagnostic testing. Of course, the problem that we have is that we need to test as a community. We need to test as many people as we can, as quickly as we can, and continually screen people to make sure that when you're going to work or you're getting on a flight or you're doing these things, that you're doing so without the virus, and you're not likely to spread any illness to the people that you're around, whether or not that's at work or in transit, et cetera, et cetera. The two core, real core testing methodologies that you hear about is PCR, which is a lab-based testing methodology. It's really the first testing that really scaled up for COVID purposes. This requires you, as many people, I'm sure, watching this have been tested. You get a swab, a nasal swab. That swab goes to the lab, and then within 24 hours, you're going to get results from your test. Lateral flow testing, which the public is not as familiar with right now, just looks like this. So, simply put, basically the same type of technology or the same type of application as a pregnancy test, which everybody's familiar with. You're going to take a sample, a biological sample, whether or not that be blood or saliva, swab of the mouth, swab of the nasal canal for antigen tests or antibody testing, which will be the future once the vaccine is kind of scaled and we have more adherence to that. You do a blood test, and that will tell you whether or not you have the antibodies built up or you have had the vaccination. These tests are manufactured by multiple companies, all of the big players, Roche, Abbott. These are the big names that you hear about having these RDT tests, developing solutions for COVID using rapid lateral flow, which, as we say, is that pregnancy-style test. You deposit this biological sample, you wait for a prescribed amount of time. Sometimes that's 8 minutes, sometimes it's 15 minutes, at which point you're going to read that test, you're going to interpret it manually, and you're going to see whether or not you're testing positive or you're testing negative for COVID. Now, controlling for that, when we talk about the differences, one of the things that's accepted about these antigen, these RDT tests, is that there's a bit of a higher error rate on these. Not because there's a problem with the actual manufacturing of the test, but because you're relying on an individual, a minimally trained individual most of the time to conduct these tests, and you're doing a bunch of them all at once. So you're PPE'd right up as a nurse or as a technician. You've got your mask on, you've got your visor on, you've got your gloves on. You're taking biological samples rapidly from as many people as you can, and then you're triaging these tests so that you can interpret them effectively. Obviously, this leads to a bunch of errors. The accepted error rate that you hear quite a bit about is kind of somewhere between 8 and 10%. So you're really talking about 1 in 10 tests that may have an issue with it based on just, as I say, the human error. You don't put enough of a biological sample, you put too little, you forget to do it because you're in a high stress situation, you don't wait the prescribed amount of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we do is that we've built a system that actually wraps around these static tests, these RDT tests, and controls for that error rate, controls for that data capture, controls for that compliance and regulatory needs to report to whatever region or jurisdiction or legal requirements you have, is all automated. Our device, which is this one here, you can see this is called the DECI reader, works on a software AI back end. This device has been developed to allow for rapid diagnostics of any approved RDT test. Doesn't matter which manufacturer makes it, doesn't matter what disease. So the history with this device is it has been deployed in a dozen countries, 4 different continents, tested on about 1 million patients. Ebola, malaria, listeria. If it's an infectious disease that can be tested by use of rapid diagnostic tests, we've done it on our device. Now we're just doing it for COVID, and we've just the perfect application is the airports, which we've just announced last week here in Canada.
Yeah, I want to get to the exciting news as far as the airports are concerned. So 2 things we have to understand here. One, we're eliminating dramatically the error rate on the processing of these tests, and 2, the amount of tests that can be processed at a single time is exponentially increased, which also helps in eliminating the error rate. You mentioned Pearson Airport here in Toronto, the Canadian government getting behind testing as far as Pearson is concerned. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so last week we announced that we have an engagement with the GTAA, and that's to deploy our system at the Pearson Airport. Biggest airport in Canada. Of course, international airport. There's about 50 million people per annum before COVID through the international airport, which is we are about 10 minutes away here in Toronto. Our lab is very close by. We announced that effectively we are not only just the device that does the capturing of the rapid diagnostic tests, but actually the system that is collecting a lot of the other data points from PCR testing and other testing that'll be used in the airport. The initial engagement, which has been press released, and you can find it on our website or whichever investment portal you use. You can see as a 90-day series of studies or trials that are backed by the NRC, which is a National Research Council of Canada. funding for a commercial purpose of really scaling our testing solution up at the airport, and then looking to do more than just employees and voluntary flyers. Obviously, the whole race in the business now is to scale these solutions, get out of these proof of principles and showing that they can work in a lab somewhere, and actually show that there's a major commercial value. And I think that's what we're doing with this engagement and the others that are coming.
Clark Kent is president of Relay Medical. Clark, real quick to wrap things up here, everybody wants to get to a post-pandemic world. What does that look like for Relay Medical?
Well, look, fortunately, unfortunately, we're not a silver bullet. There's going to be many solutions that the world is going to deploy over the next few years in order to get us to a post-COVID world. The analogy that we use, which is kind of a bold one, but I think is a very good example, is what happened post 9/11 20 years ago. You have your terrorist attack. You have a change that takes place in how our governments, our citizens, our people view the way that security is conducted, the way that they fly, their rights as far as data is considered. And you'll see 20 years later, this has been built into our infrastructure now. One event triggered a massive change. It's a post 9/11 world. We are living in a post-COVID world. We're living in a COVID world, but a post-COVID world. And this is going to require that we have infrastructures in place for the future, so that when COVID-20, COVID-21, H1N1, other things come into play, and we have other viruses or diseases or illnesses that we're worried about, we have the infrastructure to test, and we as a community or as countries and groups of citizens are not again caught with our pants down, which results in issues in the marketplace and mental health and all these things. We are an infrastructure play. We're not a COVID company. We provide a solution that allows for mass testing, decentralized, outside of lab-based, for any infectious disease that can be done by lateral flow test. And that's a lot of them. And that will be many of the tests or the issues in the future will be the same. And this is really about the infrastructure. And that's what we're doing.
Clark Kent, president of Relay Medical. It's exciting technology and much needed, obviously, at this point as we work towards something that resembles a post-pandemic world. It's been a pleasure. We look forward to an update in the future.
Thank you very much.
There you go, guys. Interesting test-related, COVID-19 test-related technology, guys.